Um, I in 2013 or about 2012, the war started, and my family we're about like 10 people, yeah, or 11. We were 12, but then we're 11 now. My oldest brother had an asthma attack, and during that time it was really like a huge bombings in Syria, and where my village, we really lived like in a really small village where there was like no medical supplies, and nothing that can help him. And my parents then decided to like basically just leave the village and take him to the city where the hospital is. 2 hours later, they drove there, and because of the bombings, they did not let him get into the hospital. So he passed away on the way there, just because of an asthma attack and lack of supplies in our village. After that, my parents really decided to leave the country just because there was no hope of staying there. We were out of school for like months. There was no help. And then we got many like basically notes that they're gonna bomb the village and bomb our house. So literally like few days after we left Syria, our house got bombed completely. So we were basically just on the edge. We got to Jordan. We went to Al-Zatari camp. We stayed there for about a week. It was 2013 when we left. And so Al-Zatari camp was basically just all tents in the middle of like the deserts. And they gave us some resources for us, food, but it was not livable, especially with my family conditions, because we had also 2 other brothers who were suffering from like a rare disease that we had no idea about. So it was impossible for us to stay there. We sneaked out of the Zatari camp going to the city. We had to Al-Zarqa in Jordan. And so we stayed there for like about 4 years until we got the letters or the invites to come here to the US. We didn't basically choose where we want to be. It was just like, you're going to be placed in New York, Syracuse. So we're like, okay. And then we got here in at the end of 2016. I got here, I was about in my junior year. So I finished my junior year. I finished my senior year, and I started attending community college here in Syracuse. In my first year of OCC, community college, I used to go to Northside Learning Center, which is a center in front of my house that used to help refugee students with their homework and stuff. And that was one of the main sources that I used to basically learn English, do my homework, apply for college, everything else that I need. And I think it was late December. Was it late December, Ahmed Badr? When you first came? And it was just a winter night. It was snowing. And then we had like, Mark has told me about an opportunity where like Ahmed Badr is going to come and speak, and he's going to do a writing workshop. So I went there, and then he was just starting asking us questions that we should write it down. It was just like, first question was like, describe your country in like few words. And I've never like basically came across my mind that like I would write something like creative. So I wrote something, and I was like how did he was able to like dig that in my head? I was never like able to write that good. I liked poetry. I liked to write, but I was never like basically thought that I can write in English in a creative way. So I was like, interesting. That's something that I think that I can be able to do. And he kept asking us questions, and the way that he said like, oh, he's going to collect all of our like papers, that he's going to put them in a book. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to write the best that I can. I have to write my best. So I started writing and stuff. And then as soon as I went home and the workshop was done, I had a notebook, and I literally put it under my pillow, and I started writing whenever I feel like I'm going to write. And then like few weeks after that, the Northside Learning Center told us that Ahmed Badr is gonna come back in the summer, and he's gonna do like a whole workshop program. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm definitely gonna join. So for anyone who doesn't know, Narratio Fellow, it's an annual intensive storytelling leadership program that provide like refugees started in Syracuse with resources and tools to help them share their experience and histories. And I'm really, really excited that this is going to be in Richmond, because I want to connect also with the refugees there, and I want to help them also to express themselves. Because when I came here, I felt like I went through so much trauma that I wanted to share, and I wanted the world to hear. But there was no way for me to like share that. I didn't know, like, I can't just like talk to anyone, and I can't just like be, oh, here, do you want to hear my story? Do you want to hear what I went through? Do you want to hear? Do you want to be able to help refugees? So this was something that I really wanted to do. And so when the program started, I never knew that, you know, I can come up, or I can have that idea and have the poetry, and that can be made in a very creative way. I just never imagined that I would be able to become a published poet with the work, and that can be heard by millions. And then after that, like, it really helped me to connect with so much people, like in Syracuse, outside of Syracuse, and everywhere. So when we started the program, we had some workshop over at the Northside Learning Center. We had workshops at Syracuse University. They would show us how to create videos, how to basically start a poetry, and how to do a podcast. All of the members of 2019, we all decided to do poetry. And then we basically had to choose a like a piece from the Metropolitan Museum. And then when I was searching for my piece, I came across this vase that reminded me of my country, because the way we decorated, it used to be like a lot of vases around the house and stuff. So when I came across it, I was like, yeah, this is the one. So I chose the vase, and then based on that, I started writing my poetry. And then when the poetry came out, I was just like, I was impressed by the work that I did, and by the help that they gave me that actually made me do that. Because I don't think without their help, or without the workshops and the efforts that they have put, I would be able to like basically make this piece happen. So I want to share a picture of me when I first saw the piece like with me at the Metropolitan Museum when we went to present. I'm not sure if I'm able to share my screen. Oh yeah, so here. So this was the first time I ever saw the piece, and I was so happy. I was like, it's so small. When I saw it in the camera, it was like huge. It looked huge. And then when I came, I was like, wow, like this is just so small. And I already felt like I connect to this. Like this is something that I owned, or like this. There's so much connection between me and the piece. So that was amazing. But I want to share with y'all the poetry. Let me see. I can't find I lost the screen, the Zoom screen. Anyway, here it is. So in the poetry, I basically was talking about the last day in Syria and what I felt, what I saw around me. I was focusing on my grandfather just because when the time I had to write the piece, I lost him like a few months ago, and I was just really, I really wanted to express that in my poetry. So the title of the poetry is The Day I Left. يا بيت جدي ضاع المفتاح وبابك بتبكي على اللي راح. Oh grandfather, our house key is lost, and the doors cry for those who left. I wake up and my eye immediately forgot the taste of a good sleep. I look around wondering what's there left to see. I see my grandfather, the vessel, and the house key. I look at the vessel, not understanding what I see. I see my grandfather's eyes as he prepared to face his fears. Fears that we are leaving, like drops of tears. I walk out of the house not knowing why I must leave. Everyone holds my hands, giving me something I need. Then my grandfather asked me, where is the house key? I don't know, Jiddi. Will we be back to use this key again? Will the doors be there to greet us? I set a foot in the street, knowing what my body needs. My thoughts fight among themselves, bleeding into tears. I don't recognize the look in my grandfather's eyes. He looks as if he's about to face his worst fear. The fear turns into a teardrop. He takes his glasses off, but the fear is stubborn. The tear is stubborn. It refuses to leave his face. يا بيت جدي ضاع المفتاح وبابك بتبكي على اللي راح. Oh grandfather, our house key is lost, and the doors cry for those who left. Thank you, Ahmed. So this is the piece that I wrote. And honestly, I've probably said it like over 100 million times now, but every time I say my poetry, like I just get these warm feelings again. And the more I read my poetry, the more I feel like I connect to it. And this is really something that I'm so proud to basically published. So after the poetry was published in Ahmed's book, I got many invites, like from Syracuse, locally here, Syracuse University, locally and even outside, to share my story and be part of the organizations. One of the really huge organizations that I started becoming with is Carry the Future. So the executive director of the Carry the Future reached out to me and she told me, I read your poetry, I am really impressed and I want you to join us. I want you to become a board of directors. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've never thought that this summer program that can lead me to there. And even until now, I still read my poetry locally and outside. And this is like something that I really want all the refugees, youth, to have this same like experience, and they want to share their journey. Even locally, I also got a lot of invites to basically work with refugees. One of them, I started doing a research with Upstate Medical Hospital focusing on refugees' mental health. So the idea was to focus on how parents, especially refugee parents, view mental health and how that impacted their kids. So I started interviewing people from, like, we had 6 different groups from all around the world. We started interviewing them and see how basically the way they view mental health impacts their kids, and if they want to share any like trauma or like how their kids basically face mental health. And that what we have seen, sadly, is that it's really such a huge taboo with a lot of like refugees who come here, just because there's not really a lot about mental health that was being taught like back where I lived or where they lived. So a lot of them just basically don't deal with it. They basically normalize it. And for parents, basically they didn't seek any help, and they're expecting the same for their kids. And sadly, that became a huge issue here, that to see like how these youth that can basically bring a lot into the community are just facing with mental health within themselves. And for them, like, they think that this is something normal and they should not even ask for help for it. And probably most of them, they don't even know that they have the opportunity to seek for help. This is one of the things that I've really been working on, because, we all know how much mental health can impact us, how we function on a daily basis. And I really do believe that having these workshops, having these surrounded by people who have shared the same experience would help you at least go through this. Poetry have become such a therapy for me. And every time I read it, just brings peace into my heart. And I really think that it would help many people. So doing this in Richmond, this is really going to be amazing for the people there. And I hope that I would be able to connect with these youth as well, to grow our community and to create a safe space for all of the refugees to share their experience and be able to feel that they are being heard by many people around the world. And this is basically the least that we can do for them to ease in their trauma that they have went through. So I'm really excited that Narratio is going to grow to Richmond, and this is when I heard that, I was like, yeah, like let it grow, let it grow. Not only in Syracuse, I love it being in Syracuse and I want to keep having it in Syracuse, but I think this is going to be amazing having it in different places. This is going to be like a way for them to express themselves in many ways that they like. I like poetry, and then I know for the class of 2020 they did photography, where students made films, and they were able to, even when they made films, they had like some voice in the backgrounds, or they would talk, and like that was also amazing. And then for 2021 they also did both poetry and filmings, which was like amazing combination. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in 2022. And with working with Narratio, I was able to basically, when we went to Metropolitan Museum, I was able to say my poetry in front of like a lot of, people there. And at first I was just like shocked. I was probably, if you all see the video, I was shaking hands. I didn't know, I messed up a few words, but with the time over and over, now I'm just like, it's just like my name, that now I can connect and say it, and feel more confident and comfortable sharing my story and my poetry. And this is going to be probably the same thing for other kids. It's going to be a way for them to connect, feel confidence, even with their broken English or non-broken English. And then with time, they're just going to be very, very comfortable sharing their piece and sharing parts of their part of their life. So yeah, I know I've been talking for like years. If any one of you have any questions, please feel free to like unmute.
Mira, I have a question for you. My name is Juan, and I work with Chattanooga County Public Schools, and I am an immigrant from Colombia. I have basically two questions. The first one is, it is too complicated to leave our countries when we are obligated. So now that you are living in America, what would be the words or some experiences or some words that you are going to say to a family who just came to the United States as a refugee? And the second one is, you are a young lady, and how has been your experience as a young lady compared with the typical young ladies in America?
So for the first one, I think that I wouldn't say anything to a refugee community or forever who's coming. I would show them my help, because I think that, having enough help, feeling warm and feeling that you are having enough resources around you would really help you to guide. And like, so there's a lot you can say, but these people have just left their country, have just left their family. And so probably no matter what you say to them, it's just, yes, they're going to feel warmth for a second. They're going to feel happy, but I think just being able to be by their side and be there if they need any help, any questions, that really what's going to make them feel like, now they have another family here that they can connect to. They have people that can rely on to help them. And so this is one thing that I've been trying to do, because this is what I actually felt that I needed the most when I came here. And then for your questions, how is it different for me? I would say that as a young lady, maybe how went through a lot compared to like a typical American here. I feel like I've always have a broad way into like my opinion. I feel like always, your experience have shaped your opinion, your experience have shaped your thoughts, your beliefs and ideas. And so for me, that's how it has been. Like I've been always, for someone that probably college students who I always have a lot to bring into the table from different perspectives compared to someone who has been just limited here, and they would basically share their idea based on their small community or like small circle. Whereas like I've lived into many faces that have made my circle like bigger, my ideas different. So I feel like I would direct my opinion, my thoughts in a very different way. I don't know if that makes sense or not. And so I think that a lot of people, or a lot of young girls who are my age and went through the same thing, who came here, a lot of them tried to like basically shy themselves in and like not be able to express, and that's just because of they didn't have enough sources, especially with Afghani ladies that have came here. I've seen they're really like shy, and most of them, they are trying not to go to school here in Syracuse, because they don't feel comfortable. And now it is my job. It is my job to basically convince them that they should be able to go out. And I would, if just sharing my experience with them would help them, that would probably make them a bit more comfortable to do the same. Because I felt the same thing when I came here. I was like, oh, no way I can go to like American school and like not be able to like say anything. I'm just gonna seem dumb. I'm just not gonna know anything. And yeah, I felt that the first like couple of months. I would go to like, especially history class. Like I had no idea what he'd be talking about. I would just looking in the class and I'm just like, I don't know. But then I was surrounded by like people who basically were like, oh, here, they would translate few words to me. I told them that I don't want to like a lot of like all the translations, because I want to feel the challenge, and I want to also be surrounded by Americans or like non-Arabic speakers who can also help me to understand Arabic. But having them around, I felt always comfortable, basically, like, because if I'm facing any issues or if I have any problem, I have these friends that I can rely on. And I hope it's the same way in Richmond. I know you guys told me that there is basically a refugee communities there. So I hope that there is enough people to help each other, because for them, like, they know exactly how it feels. And when somebody else comes, they are able to help them. And even for like non-Arabic speakers or like Americans, they can also be a source of help, because your job now is to basically feel that refugee kid welcome to your community, because this is the first key where they are actually able to like adopt and blend in with the community in their own perspectives and their own identity. So both refugee youth and non-refugee have the responsibility to feel this kid feel more welcome by just being there when they need help. And believe me, a lot of them don't ask for help. They're just waiting for you to show it. I have seen that a lot, because here many people, they just don't feel like, oh, like I'm gonna go ask for help, or they just feel like I shouldn't be able to, like I shouldn't ask for help, I should do that myself, or like I'm just shy to ask for help or something. And so it is our job to basically just always be there for them. And even if they don't need help, because probably a lot of them don't know exactly what's there, what's the opportunity that they can have, we can show them these opportunities. We can express it to them. So I'm not sure like the way that you guys are helping to recruit for the Narratio, but maybe like if you express it in a way for kids that they are able, who are willing to join, or even if they don't know it, sometimes these kids would want to join something like that where they can share the experience, but they basically don't know about it. So that can always be helpful.
Nidaa, you were just talking about trying to get kids interested in Narratio. How would you, there's a lot of volunteers on here who probably are interacting with young folks who might be interested. Could you just share, like, how would you try to recruit a student to participate in Narratio? What would you tell them about the experience?
I would say it's something that they will definitely enjoy, in a way where they can express themselves, in a way where they are going to be heard in terms of their story, in a way where they can develop many skills, communication skills, builds more confidence, and also this is going to help them in many ways to open more opportunities. If you want, we can have like, I would volunteer to like talk to some of the kids who are, you guys are willing to, wants to share, and I would be more than happy to share my experience and connect with them, as a Narratio alumni.
Nidaa, I work really closely with a Saturday school program called Tusome Pamoja, and I think that would be really lovely once we start up again. It's a little paused right now for COVID reasons, but I will definitely reach out to you. I think this would be an incredible opportunity for some of our students.
Yeah, that would be great. I would be more than happy to talk to them, because of how many experience and, how many opportunities that I was able to have after I worked with Narratio. I would definitely recommend it for many refugee kids, because I know how much this can help them and help the people around to hear their stories in a very creative way. Is there an age limit to who can participate? I believe it's like high schoolers, college students. This is Ahmed Badr and Bryce's decision. 16 to 21, yeah. One thing I also want to share with y'all is I want to ask questions about how, what are sources that are available for Richmond and for the kids there. I know you mentioned about Saturday school, but what else is there like available for these kids?
I can answer that a little bit, as well as I think Leslie probably has a good answer. But currently, Reestablish Richmond does provide volunteer tutors for the youth clients that are referred to us. We do that only virtually right now because of COVID, but it has been really helpful in having a one-on-one support for our youth clients. And then our Saturday school works specifically with students who had limited or interrupted formal education to try and build back and fill those holes or gaps in education that they had. Usually those run for about 6 weeks at a time, and it's like an all-intensive school day on Saturdays. They, I think, are there from 8 to 2:30 or 3. They get a nice, wonderful home-cooked meal from a multitude of the countries that they're from. We try to focus on having food and cultural resources that are relevant. But
yeah. That's really nice. And it would be really great if we can expand, our refugee community here from here to Richmond, because I really think that having these like safe spaces for refugees where they can connect with other refugees and feel, this sort of like, I don't know, it feels like these are like my brothers and sisters, where we just all went through the same thing, and now if we can be able to connect, regardless of where we are and where we live and what are we doing with our life right now, it would be really amazing, and it would feel such a great community. So having Narratio there, it's definitely gonna build these connections between Syracuse, Narratios, and Richmond, and I hope that Ahmed then would expand on that and bring it even further all around the state.
Can you describe the refugee center that you found roots in Syracuse? I grew up in Syracuse, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
So we came through Catholic Youth Charity. They were really nice in terms of how they treat us. We had, so with my brother's conditions, we have 2 brothers who are not able to like walk or talk, so they need wheelchair, and they were able to provide us with home that has like a ramp for them. And then they had a lot of like resources for like learning English, and they would take us to all the appointments that we needed. All that for like 90 days, about 90 days when the family has came. I would still argue that like refugee families would need more than 90 days caseworker to help them, because this is just about when they actually got into the country and like, oh, here's this and that, and then the caseworker leaves, and then the family are just like, what is going on? So I would definitely like encourage resold agencies here and everywhere to basically connect with the family for more than 90 days, because I don't believe it's enough. It wasn't enough for my family. A lot of families don't feel like it's enough, unless like, you know, they're having like a really great like English, or they have people here who can help them, you know, showing them around, taking them to appointments and etc. But I've been in like a lot of conversations with Catholic Youth Charity to extend the caseworkers, you know, time. But with the amount of refugees coming, there's not enough people to like basically stay with a family for more than 90 days, because there's so many families coming and they want to be able to help everyone else here. But that's the resettled refugees that I got into, and now I've been volunteering with them for like about a year now, where I do COVID swaps for all the families that comes here in Syracuse. So once the family comes here, they quarantine for a week, and then after that week, they come to Catholic Youth Charity. We do COVID swaps for them, and then if they're good, then you know that's they don't have to quarantine anymore. But this has been a really great way for me to connect with the families, their kids, and help them. And for Afghani's families, I've seen a lot of them, like some of them speak 2 languages. A lot of the families who speak like Urdu are able to speak English for some reason. The school they went to, they taught in English, which is good. I was able to like talk to the kids, tell them about the schools here, what they do and all that. So I really hope that there are also the same ways in Richmond where the students are feeling, you know, comfortable, because when they come here, they're lost. Like they don't know what high school they're going to go to. They don't know how it's the environment's there. They don't know what they should study, and how is also like the system here, or like the school system, very, very different compared to like where they came from. So telling them about it, like getting them started, all that would really be helpful for the kids.
We have time for another question or comment if anyone has final thoughts or questions for Nidaa.
Yeah, I had a question about your poetry. And when you're working with it, are you thinking in Arabic and English, or in pictures, or?
Good question. So I thought in ways, honestly, in English and Arabic, because as you see, like my first line was basically in Arabic. So I started off in Arabic, and then as I moved on, I started in English. But I always like try to say the poetry in Arabic for my parents to understand. And then like when I read it to my relatives, I always like just read it in Arabic for them to be able to understand. But I did both ways.
Thank you. Wonderful.
I want to add very quickly, Nidaa, we're so proud of you. This is incredible. I promised Nidaa I was not paid to say all the nice things about Narratio. But I just had a quick question about like language, the role of language in I mean, you talked about it just now, but a key part of the program is also kind of opening up different languages beyond just English in terms of the creative work. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts around that specific component.
I think that was amazing. I know a lot of poetries, even most of them had some words in like Somali, Arabic, and many other languages that the kid would say. And I thought that like this connections, or these two like together, it made the piece even better. And this is even where the comfortable place comes in, because you're not really you don't have to do it in English for the people to understand. You can always do it in your own language, and then it can be easily translated. And that where the best part comes in, when I know like, oh, I can actually write it in Arabic. Like I can start off in Arabic. I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then English just comes along after that. But that was one of the, I remember still like the word hoyo in Somali, which means like mother, in one of the pieces. And that always just like stick in my head. And a lot of like Narratio Fellow that I see here around, they always like tell me, oh, like we still remember like the word jiddi, which means grandfather. That just stuck in their heads after like because when we were practicing, we would basically just practice it in front of these Narratio Fellows, and we have built such a great connections with them that, you know, after that they would be able to like repeat our poetry of how many times they have heard it first. So same thing with me, like I've just heard it so many times with them, and the more I hear it, the more I'm like, oh, okay, like now I memorized your whole poetry. So having this connection with the Narratio is just, Narratio Fellow was amazing. And even with the people who came after, like in 2020 and 2022, I was also able to communicate with them, connect with them, and hear their poetry, see their photography work and stuff. So yeah. Yep.
Hi, Nidaa. I am an English teacher for adults, and volunteering, I teach exclusively the mothers, the women. I do not know a lot about poetry. Is there a very introductory exercise you can suggest for our women to start dabbling in poetry?
I think like asking them like questions that they can write. I still remember Ahmed Badr just asked me questions like, oh, describe your country in few words. Describe how you feel about like your family. Describe what you miss about country. These words really like, or questions with triggers the most emotions in that, especially for mothers. A lot of them have left their parents. Like, tell me what's the most that you have missed about your parents. Tell me a memory that you remember with your mom or with your parents. Tell me a memory about your childhood in your country. I think these questions would really help to trigger the emotions and like creative writings within the parents. Especially.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I was, hi.
Hello.
I was wondering if you also had interest with, especially with the young people coming together like on Saturdays, of doing other kinds of art for those maybe who aren't as, you know, comfortable or creative with the language, with visual arts or dancing or music. Is there any time or interest in creating fun and connectedness that way?
Yeah, I think what are like most of like their ethnicities and stuff with these kids? I think like having just like talking to them or like sharing stories or even drawings or whatever the kids like more majority prefer, but that would be amazing. And I would love to connect with them.
Okay.
Most of the students in Saturday School are from the Congolese community.
Oh, nice, nice.
Mm-hmm. We have some from Spanish-speaking communities, but only a few.
Any last question? And if not, Nidaa, thank you so much. How inspiring to hear and think about these possibilities. It's wonderful that it's coming to Richmond and that you've brought your expertise to us. So I guess now this is our first, do we take a break? Is that what we do, Kate? For a few minutes and come back at 10? Or at 11, sorry. Yes, at 11.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah,
I'm really honored being here, and I hope that Afwan. And I hope that I was sort of help for the people there. And I'm really willing to connect, and I'm hoping that I can connect with the refugee population in Richmond and help them there. So thank you so much for having me here. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Nidaa.
Bye.
Oh.
All right.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the second session of the 2022 Refugee and Immigrant Volunteer Summit, which is sponsored by Reestablish Richmond and the Sacred Heart Center and the International Rescue Committee. So we are moving now. We just had poetry. We're about to have a very practical session. And our topic is Welcome to the U.S. Tax System. This is going to be a primer of tax issues facing newcomers to the United States. And some of us old timers may be interested to learn some things as well. Our presenter today is David Sams. David is currently the Executive Director and Staff Attorney for the Community Tax Law Project. He is a graduate of the Graduate Tax Program at the University of Florida Levin College of Law, where he also received his law degree. And in addition to his law work, he has advised and served as a director of several nonprofits. He currently serves on the advisory board for the University of Richmond's Institute on Philanthropy and is the current president of the Virginia Association of Fundraising Executives. So we're very excited to have such a qualified, highly qualified person to speak with us this morning. So all yours, David.
Thank you, Margaret. And I'd like to start with saying that I'm also an immigrant. I don't usually, I forget to put that in the bio, but I feel like it's important for today. So thank you for having me. I don't know how I'm going to follow poetry and art with tax, but let's try to keep this a little bit light. Also, please put, if you want to raise your hand, or if you want to just, put it in the chat if you have any questions. So we can't cover everything with the Internal Revenue Code. The thing is much longer than the Bible, so we won't be doing that today. I'm not equating the Internal Revenue Code to the Bible, so that's my disclaimer. So let's have some fun. All right, let me see here. So, all right, can everybody see that screen? Is it okay if I'm moving it that way? Okay. All right, so let's have some fun with taxes. Yeah, but you're all rolling your eyes going, what fun can we have with taxes? Awful things. Well, what can we count on in life? Death, taxes, neither or both. Let me see if I can move. Oh yeah, there we go. That's perfect. Okay. Any ideas? You want to put that in the chat? What you think? I'm sure we all know it's we can count on both. So definitely not fun, death or taxes, but something we all have to deal with. So who doesn't have to pay taxes? This is a funny one for newcomers to the United States. The president, governor, priests and pastors, or all of the above. Well, it's a trick question because all of the above has to be the answer. None of those folks have to pay taxes for the most part. If they're doing their own job, if they're doing something else, if the president just decides to drive Uber at night, he might have to pay some taxes. So hopefully that doesn't occur. All right, is this statement true or false? This is getting more into reality. I only babysit for my sister 3 times a week. And do I need to, file taxes? Well, now I'm going to get into the lawyer responses of it depends. If you did that every week for 52 weeks and you were getting $30, you would have to file taxes as a self-employed person. The person that's paying you that as a babysitter does not have to file anything because but they would if they wanted to claim you as a child and care worker. But that's beyond the scope of today's talk. All right, so let's what's the prison sentence? This one I get a lot. I would have thought after this many years that these questions, this is a real life question. Someone owed $150 on their tax return, and they called us and they're like, am I going to jail for 1 month, maybe a year? It depends. No one's going to jail unless you're like a multi-million-dollar tax fraud person. No one's going to jail for messing up by about $150 on your tax return. That's not a big deal. Even much higher than that it's a big deal, but it's not going to land you in prison. So. Ahmed doesn't pay taxes because he works for the IRC, a nonprofit. The IRC doesn't charge for services. I spelled his name wrong there. Ahmed is so awesome that he's just exempt. We just love Ahmed. We're not going to make him pay taxes. Obviously, this is all nonsense. Ahmed has to pay taxes like the rest of us. Sadly, even if it's a not-for-profit, still doesn't. It means that the entity itself doesn't pay taxes, but for the most part, in generally not-for-profit work. But Ahmed, as an employee of the not-for-profit, would have to pay taxes. All right, so I work for the Community Tax Law Project. We are called what is called a low-income taxpayer clinic. We were set up. We are actually celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. Our founder saw a problem in her own legal work. She was turning away a lot of taxpayers who were what she would have characterized at the time as the working poor. So these are people who didn't make a lot of money, but they had jobs. So they were getting up every day. They were going to work, sometimes 2 to 3 jobs, but barely making ends meet. So if they got an extra bill, it wouldn't be good. So these aren't the people putting away like massive amounts of money in a 401k. There's no golden parachutes here. These are just average people. And she was turning them away when they would come with an IRS letter. They would ask her to represent, and she would be like, look, you owe the IRS $3,000. You're going to have to pay me probably about $15,000 to fix this in attorney's fees. I'm sorry, you may as well just pay the IRS, even though the IRS was wrong in those cases, which was sad. And when I was in private practice, I had the same problem. If someone came to me with a problem, an IRS issue that was less than $15,000, it just wasn't worth paying me the number of hours it was going to take for me to fix it. So, which was sad. So she created the Community Tax Law Project. Then she sold the idea to Congress, and now there's a low-income taxpayer clinic like CTLP, at least one in every state. In a lot of big cities, there's more than one. In New York City, there's 3. The population kind of dictates that. So what we do is we provide legal representation for people who meet our income eligibility, which is 250% of the federal poverty guidelines. So we're a bit higher than legal aid. We also, that's for fully blown legal representation. We are your lawyers. You sign an agreement with us. We help you free of charge. Brief advice is for anybody. So if you have a tax question, regardless of how much money you make, you can call CTLP for some brief advice. Brief advice should not be a 3 or 4 day interaction. It should be a question, and we either research it or answer it right on the spot. It's usually a one and done type of thing, but it can be more complicated. I've worked on brief advice for a few days, when it's been a more of a strange situation with an international component. So that's totally fine. I don't want those every day because I wouldn't be able to get our other work done, but I will take those in certain situations. We do community education, which is like what we're doing now. I love to go out and talk to anybody who will listen to me talk about taxes. Try to make it a bit of fun, or at least as lighthearted as I can. We also do legal education where we educate other lawyers on tax issues. And then we do a lot of advocacy work at the state level, the local level, and at the federal level. We did a lot of that during the pandemic related to stimulus payments, trying to make sure that people were getting the money that they were owed. And a lot of the changes. Is there a question? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we did a lot of work making sure that people, the IRS, were doing what they needed to do to get the stimulus payments out to whoever was owed, which is, still a bit of a bumpy road, but we did a lot of work in that area. So the basics, what does it mean to be a taxpayer? When we work, we become a taxpayer. Our taxes are used to run the country, state, city, etc. Volunteers reporting. It's a voluntary reporting system and mandatory. I'm just trying to move my screen there a little bit. There we go. Voluntary reporting, but mandatory participation. Not for everybody. I'll get to that. But so that's the way our system works. Now, you all are dealing with folks from a variety of different countries. So they may have experiences that are similar to this. They may have experiences that are completely different than this. The tax person may have been a person with a machine gun. That's the person they paid their taxes to. They may have paid their taxes in livestock. That's not unheard of. It's having a system where the government is going to accept what you write down on a form as truth is quite an interesting thing, and sometimes hard for people to wrap their heads around if they have some distrust for the government. So, all right. So do you have to pay taxes? Generally, yes. If you make money in any sort of manner, you usually have to pay taxes. However, you may not have to file a tax return. That doesn't mean you haven't paid your taxes. It just means that the government isn't expecting to get that piece of paper either in the mail or filed electronically from you. For an example for that would be a single wage earner. So when they do their tax return, they check the box for single. They work part-time. This is like a young person that doesn't have a lot of expenses. So they made less than $12,550. They don't have to file a tax return if they don't want to, but I always tell them that they should. If they pay taxes, they're probably going to get some of it back. And so it's worthwhile to file a tax return. Warning, if you're self-employed, this goes really far down to only $400. So if someone worked Uber, even for a few nights, or and it came up to $400 or more, $401, now you have what's called a filing requirement. You have to file your tax return. There's a good resource, and I've put resources through this, and I'm going to share these slides with the organizers of the event so you can get this later on. But publication, and I've spelt it wrong there, publication 501 is a great summary of all of these type of rules, and it gets more into the specifics. So if you're trying to figure, if you're working with a client and you're trying to figure out whether they need to file their taxes or not, then you probably go to look at 501. It's pretty well written. Not all IRS publications are easy to read, but this one's a pretty decent one. All right, what we see a lot with our refugee and immigrant populations is problems related to this slide here, employee versus self-employed. Now, it is sometimes hard to understand why this is a problem, because we all sort of knew whether or not we were becoming an employee versus self-employed. But now take away the language understanding and the understanding of the system, then you would really see how this can be a problem. Also, you add into this the wrinkle of unscrupulous employers who tell the person that they're an employee, and then halfway through the year, they switch them over to self-employed. Now, the test is not whether they filled out a W-2 or they were told they were going to be an employee or not. It's a control issue. If the employer is controlling the person for most of the day, telling them when they're supposed to show up, when they can have a break, when they can take lunch, what they're going to do while they're there, how they're going to dress, like stay in a uniform, then that person is an employee. And they should be having their taxes taken out like they would with a W-2. If you are in control, such as an Uber driver, well, like I don't want to drive Uber tonight, so I don't have to. So now you're in control. You can start driving at 6:30 if you want. You can end at 8:30. You're now self-employed. You're in control. So the example is when you decide to work, what to wear, how much you want to work. At the end of the year, you will get what's 1099 MISC, but actually now most people are sending out what's called a 1099 NEC, non-employment compensation. So the form that they're using is different the last year than it was in the past. A good resource for this one is IRS publication 15A. That one's not as nicely written, but it's the best one I could find on this one. So if you feel like your client that you're working with was hired as an employee, and then all of a sudden at the end of the year they get a 1099 NEC, that's a good reason to call the Community Tax Law Project and refer that person over to us, because there's a process at the IRS for reclassifying that person. And that person would not be responsible for remitting their taxes. The IRS is going to go after their employer, but they would be able to be treated like they should have gotten a W-2. Usually the first step for that is to ask the employer to reclassify, but if they're shady enough to do that to the person and not tell them, then then they probably aren't going to help you in any way. This becomes a bit of a problem when the person is still employed. And I've had folks who are willing to sort of, I guess, fall on the sword and be like, okay, well, I'll just pay the taxes because I want to keep this job, which is a bit sad, but it also, I understand. They've got a job, it's paying the bills, and a few bumps along the way aren't worth them going after it. So I always give our clients the opportunity to choose. Do you want to reclassify, because this could be a problem for the employer, you're still there, blah, blah, blah. So, usually if they're gone from the place, they're usually cool with going after the person or the employer. And if they're still there, they usually don't want to mess around. So. This Community Tax Law Project deals with a lot of farm workers, and that's a group that notoriously does not want to make the employer too angry because they want to keep coming back year after year. All right, so who pays your taxes to the government? This is another one that's kind of mystical to a lot of folks when they're just arriving in the United States. If you're an employee, your employer will pay your taxes to the IRS and the Virginia Department of Tax. Resources for employers: if you have a person that is willing to hire an immigrant or a refugee that you're working with, and they're confused on what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to pay the taxes, IRS Publication 15 is a good guide for them. If they're self-employed, the person has to pay their taxes themselves. We've worked a lot with folks who have come to the United States in various means to get them on a plan, usually a monthly plan, to pay their self-employment taxes. We teach them how to do it. We provide them with the forms, or if they're savvy enough to be able to pay it online, and to sort of make sure that this doesn't become a huge problem at the end of the year. Reason we do that monthly, even though it's only required quarterly, is because things can happen from month to month. So if you have a good month in January, say the person's running construction and they have a good month in January, but the weather is awful in February, then if they've paid their taxes in January on a month-to-month basis, then they're good. They don't have to worry about what happens in February. But if they have a bad March and then all of a sudden the first quarter turns out bad, they didn't save the money. Now they're in a better position if they do it monthly than they would have if they try to do it quarterly. It's just trying to eliminate problems, even though the rules say one thing, but we find that real life is a little bit better if you do it a different way. Who collects my taxes? The IRS collects the Fed tax. Virginia Department of Tax collects state income. City, county, and town collects local taxes such as property taxes. Now, there's a lot of different taxes going on here, including you got sales tax, you got property taxes on your car, your home, if they end up buying a house, that kind of thing. So they need to be aware that there's a lot of things going on. But for the most part, when people first come to the United States, they need to worry about the first two. All right, what type of taxes? Like I mentioned before, these are the different types of taxes that you're going to be responsible for. If the person decides to do online sales with using Venmo or PayPal, there is a really troublesome federal court case called Wayfair that has now changed those rules. If they're doing eBay, most of the time eBay will handle it themselves. If they're doing Facebook Marketplace, maybe not. So if they're buying and selling stuff to make ends meet, they may run into trouble with not paying taxes through because Venmo and PayPal are being very strict about who gets reported to the federal government. So if that's a situation, it's outside the scope of this talk, but please refer them over to us with specific situations. We had one refugee family who was doing a really great job of supplementing their income with eBay sales. They were going down to a certain department store and using sales and coupons to buy items and then sell them at retail value and making a decent amount. And they weren't selling big items. They were selling pairs of jeans and various little sundry items. And the IRS came after them for a big bill. And we were able to work with them to piece together all of their expenses, how much they paid for all the items. But it was a 30-page spreadsheet. It was it was a whole year's worth of transactions. Some of the transactions were $1. So you can imagine how many purchases and sales were going on there. So, all right, when's the tax return due? Okay, this is a bit of a trick one. The general rule is April 15th for IRS, May 1st for Virginia. Now, if those days fall on a weekend or a federal holiday, then it gets moved to the next day. So this year, IRS is the 18th of April, and Virginia is due on May 2nd. Now, because we're in COVID times, these have even been shifted around, during the tax year. So last year, I believe everything in Virginia got shifted to May 17th, and then further on, the year before was completely different. So those are the general rules, but they are subject to change. That's why I have a disclaimer there. Extensions are great, but people need to understand what they're extending. They're extending the time to file, not the extend to pay. So they weren't going to get a failure to file penalty, but they may get a failure to pay penalty if they didn't prepay enough money by the regular due date. So that's a bit tricky because there's two different types of penalties going on there. So we always tell our people, even if you can't pay, file an extension or file by the due date. That way you'll avoid one penalty. And then the only penalty you're going to have is the failure to pay. Now, if they're going to get a refund, the failure to pay penalty is actually zero because it's based on the amount you owe. If you owe nothing, you have no failure to pay penalty, so you can avoid both if you get a refund. But most people, when they file an extension, are up against the time, don't have enough time to figure out what their what their full refund was supposed to be, or whether or not they were going to get a refund. So it gets a little bit tricky. All right, what happens if you can't pay by the deadline? So penalties and interest will start to be applied. So the trick with this is to file early, so that way you can figure out if there's a problem or that you're going to owe. And then both the IRS and the Virginia Department of Tax are very good about setting up payment plans. So you can do that ahead of time, and then everything will be okay, and as long as you can pay. Now, if you can't pay, there are other options, such as a hardship status with the IRS, and with the Virginia Department of Tax, you can do what's called an offer in compromise. And that will get you, into some situation where you can afford to pay, or just lets the IRS know that at this time you're unable to pay completely, and it requires you to fill out a form. I thought that was a bit beyond the scope of this talk. Just to let you know that those options are out there, and we can help with those. So if the person is going to run into that problem, either through brief advice or full representation, we can get involved and fix it from there on out. So, all right. Does anybody have any questions so far? You can go off mute or. No, all good. We can keep going on. All right. The next one is filing status, and you all are probably like, "Oh, filing status. That's pretty easy." Single's easy. That's usually people that are clearly not married. Once you've become married, then things get a bit strange. So if you're happily married and everything's good to go and nothing's weird, you can file married filing jointly, which is the preferred status for married people to file because it gets you the most credits. Married filing separately sometimes has to be done if people want to do, they have to do 2 separate returns for some sort of reason. Maybe they owe money a certain way to somebody that's going to be taking their refund, and they don't want their spouse to be harmed by that. But there's also another option I will talk about a little bit later on. This filing status for married filing separately, remember I talked about if you made less than $12,550, you didn't have to file. Well, if you're going to switch over to married filing separately, it's $5. When I first read that, I looked around to see if there was a typo, that they'd missed some zeros. But no, if you've made more than $5, you have to file a tax return if you're filing under the status of married filing separately. It's a strange rule, but it is what it is. And then there's another one called head of household. And that means you are not married generally, and you have children with you. So if you've gotten divorced and you kept the kids, then you would want to choose head of household because it's kind of a little bit better than single, and it's not quite as good as married filing jointly as far as the amount of standard deduction you get. Now, you can claim head of household if you've been separated and the person has left the house for the last 6 months. So that's a pretty harsh deadline. So by June 30th, you would have to, someone's going to have to be out of the house for someone to be able to claim head of household. Can't split the kids. One person can't take one and the other person can't take the other. You can split the kids for deduction reasons, but not for head of household reasons. I see we have a question. from Haley. How do you do that if your income isn't taxable for married filing jointly making more than $5? If you're married filing jointly, you don't worry about the $5 rule. That's married filing separately. So that shouldn't make a difference. That's why married filing jointly is much more much preferred. So thank you for the question. Okay, credits. And this is just a very, very simple, actually, I'm going to go back. Filing status. There's one more filing status, and it's called widow status. And that's for the first 2 years after someone has had their spouse pass away. And it treats your tax situation like you were married filing jointly, except for a few slight variations. And those are very, very specific, and they don't affect most people. So. All right, credits are awesome. They're also a minefield, and I'm going to tell you why. So everybody wants credits because credits mean it reduces the amount of taxes you owe. The earned income tax credit is the second largest way that the federal government gets money into the hands of folks that need help with their income. Now, this also is the most disruptive, the most hard to apply. Even paid tax preparers get this one wrong. The instructions are long. It's one of those ones where you have to answer all the questions correctly or you won't get it right. This is also, there's a misnomer that you can't get an earned income tax credit if you don't have children. That's not true. There is an earned income tax credit. It's much lower for people that are single. So it's for people that earn income. It does get much bigger the more kids you have. And as of a few years ago, the cap basically for number of children that where it affects the credit was 3. So if any additional children no longer really make a difference to their income tax credit. But this credit can be like $5,000, $6,000. This is a good credit. Now, even if you don't owe any money, the credit can come to you, so it can become your refund. So a lot of families that have not a huge amount of income and have a few children can really take good use of this earned income tax credit. So now if you tell your clients one thing about making sure that their taxes are done right, make sure they check the line that says how much their earned income tax credit is. And if it says 0, then have the person double check why it's 0. Because if your person's earning and they have a few children, the person that's doing it either made a mistake or can tell them right away what made it so that they couldn't get their earned income tax credit. So it's a great credit. It's definitely worth looking at. Child tax credit has been in the news a lot this year because of the advanced child tax credit. And I'm going to talk about that specifically coming up. That's basically just a credit for having a child. Congress thinks having children is a positive thing. And so you're getting some credit back for that. Child independent care credit, if you pay someone else to provide care. This is one to be careful with because a lot of unscrupulous paid tax preparers play tricks with this one, and you need to understand that this person needs to either be an actual business like a daycare, or needs to provide a social security number. So if it's grandma looking after the kids every now and then in the afternoons, this isn't going to work for that. Even if you gave her $20 towards their food, that's not this situation. This is more where you're paying a child like a nanny, or you're paying a daycare, that kind of thing. And that they should be comfortable if they're doing that for money. They should be comfortable giving you their taxpayer identification number. If it's a business, you get an EIN. If it's a person, you get their social. Learning credits, these are great, especially for the recent people coming in. They want to get some additional training. So you got the American Opportunity Credit for the first 4 years of college, lifetime learning credit for all other college level. All right, so back to the advanced child tax credit. Getting a lot of news this year. It was really great. People started getting checks in the mail. And then the people that didn't get checks in the mail started freaking out, going, why didn't I get my check in the mail? It was kind of like the refund recovery credits round 2 for us, because it required to make sure that people had a tax return on file, or they could use there was a portal what was called a non-filer portal. So people that hadn't filed a tax return before, such as a recent refugee wouldn't have filed a tax return before, but they may have been able to go into the portal once they got their social security number and started getting some advanced child tax credit. When I do the part, the next section on domestic violence, we'll see how this became a huge problem. Amounts have changed for each payment because Congress realized they gave out a little bit too much to some people, especially if they were coming in and doing some modifications, saying that they had say a baby was born. So they were getting, their first payment came out for one child, but then they should have been getting two, that kind of thing. So these were advanced payments. So this is your credit, the child tax credit in advance. So, and you didn't get to calculate it. You didn't get to tell the government exactly what was going on in your life. So these sometimes may have been too high, which means that on your return, you're going to get less of a child tax credit. They may have been too low. That means you can get the remaining amount of the child tax credit on your return. Worst case scenario where you weren't supposed to receive the money at all. Someone else was now looking after your kids and you kept getting the checks and you aren't even going to be able to put your kids on the return because you've signed a divorce decree or something that says someone else is. So that case, you're going to have to basically, you're going to reduce your refund or have to repay, which is alarming when the government sent you these checks and it was awesome. So yeah, it's a bit tricky that way. And then also people are like, well, I don't remember how much I got. Well, the IRS thought of that and they actually came up with a resource that I've put there, the IRS.gov credits and deductions, how much you got. So there's a way of figuring that out if you can't remember how much each check was, especially because the check amounts may have changed throughout the year. All right, the recovery rebate credit or the stimulus payments. Okay, so we still have clients that have not received any of them. So we're still working on amended returns or returns from 2020 and 21. What we're going to be filing 2021 to get the third amount of payments. At this point, there's no portal. The only way to do it is through a return or an amended return. But it's not too late because you have 3 years to get a refund from the IRS. Unfortunately, at this point, most of these are going to be offset. We tried really hard to get some of them to not be because they weren't supposed to be when they were initially given. But if there's child tax or child support payments that are owed, they may or may not get sucked out. The IRS is hoping to be able to characterize these payments properly, but when you do it on an amended return, it all depends on if the preparer does it right. How much did I get? And that's another one of those situations where people not really sure. Unfortunately, they don't have a great little portal for this one. So you have to go in and ask for your account transcript or go into your tax records tab of irs.gov/account. I'm warning you ahead of time, not everybody can set themselves up to get the account. Sometimes something's been flagged somewhere. It can be a little bit troublesome getting those accounts, but the person can usually call the IRS with a caveat of calling the IRS is usually a one-day affair. Start at 8 o'clock in the morning and maybe you'll get through by like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And maybe you can get them to send you your transcripts from there so you can figure out how much you got. Hopefully you got your IRS notices. They're 1444 for the first payment, B for the second, C for the third. If you got it directly deposited, the client would be able to look at their bank account and see these 3 different codes, TAX, EIP 1, 2, and 3 on their bank accounts to be able to see how much they got. So there's a few different ways. It's a little bit clunky. If they're still having trouble with those and the IRS isn't being cooperative, that's something we can get involved with and help them out. All right, so a little bit of more of a somber topic, but very important, especially for the folks that work with, sad to say, but a lot of our clients, the majority of our domestic violence clients are refugees, which is sad, but I'm just telling you how it is. So taxes and domestic violence, you're like, well, what on earth does taxes have to do with domestic violence? Well, the tax system is just one way where abusers go to do what's called financial abuse. It's financial abuse is a common tactic used by abusers to gain power and control in a relationship, just like physical and mental abuse. So it's all about control and power. Can be subtle or overt. Subtle could be the person's taking out credit cards in the wife's name or the husband's name, or overt, where they're holding a gun to your head saying, sign this tax return. That it's can be as crazy as that. We've seen everything under the gamut over the years in this world. Tactics to conceal information, limit the victim's access to assets, or reduce accessibility to the family finances, which all can be done through the tax system. The National Network to End Domestic Violence, which is that resource I put at the bottom, is a national group that we work with a lot on advocacy issues for domestic violence and taxes. And their statistics show that 99% of domestic violence cases will at some point have a financial component. So if you're working in this kind of world, especially with the refugee resettlement groups, you're going to be probably the first people they call if there's some sort of domestic violence going on, and they need to know that there's a component. I had a lady who called. She wasn't a recent refugee. She'd been a refugee for a number of years, but she had just fled her abusive husband, and he was playing games with taxes and ended up taking all of her stimulus payments and advanced child tax credit payments. So we're working now to sort of with her to try and make sure that she can get those back and prevent him from doing so in the future. All right, so what does this look like with taxes? Well, like I said, it can be subtle or overt. Subtle, it's like forged signatures. E-filing is, they've just basically said that the person knew what was going on. There's usually a race to file. Used to be when everybody was filing by paper, it would be like who could get it in the mail faster. And that all depended on who got their tax documents from their employer faster. Now, if the abuser was a self-employed person, he made his own documents so he could file on day one of the tax season. Whereas if the wife was a W-2 worker, she would be waiting for, like at the mercy of her employer before she got her W-2. She would always lose the race to file. This is a little bit different with e-filing because sometimes e-filing can not work for someone who's a self-employed person, which actually means that the wife can actually go with her W-2s and file quicker if she knows to do so. So the race to file is still a problem because the person that files first is accepted by the IRS, and the person who's filed second, even though it might be legitimate, is flagged as, and their return is usually rejected. So then we can get involved. We have a process which is called a superseding return, and we do a few extra steps to make sure the IRS knows that this is a domestic violence situation, and this is a proper return, and they should file it as well and take a look at it. And then they would audit probably both returns. So it's a headache, it's a mess, but it's the only way we have of fixing this. Improperly claiming children, even after divorce decrees are put in place, there's child custody documents, but the person just keeps claiming the kids anyways. It's just year after year it can become a mess, even with the restraining order. So the person can't come within 100 meters of the person, but they can mess with them. Even from jail, we've seen someone messing with people with a victim from jail using tax system. Violence used to force a signature. I've had a client whose fingers were all cut off and a door being slammed because she wouldn't sign the tax return. We've had people with a knife at their throat. It is brutal, making them sign tax returns that are blank. So saying, okay, you're going to file this or else. And then, they're signing a blank sheet of paper. Self-employment income claim for the victim, even though that person never worked. Intimidation to not review the return. You name it, it kind of goes the gamut. I had one lady who was afraid of bringing up tax questions, so afraid that her children were going to get hurt that she never would question her taxes. And after her husband passed away, we had to fix a number of years of tax problems that he had created without her knowledge. So, all right. So not all of these situations are nefarious. They're not all domestic violence situations. There's injured versus innocent spouse. So the innocent spouse situation is what I've been describing with the domestic violence. Injured spouse is a process at the IRS where, say, a husband and wife get married. Husband has some back child support that he owes, that every year his refund gets sent to pay for that. So the new spouse doesn't want to be penalized for that. So you can file filing jointly, so you can get all the good credits, but then you split using IRS form 8379, the amount proportionally based on income. So, say if the husband makes 60% of the income and the wife makes 40%, they would split the refund in that manner. His would still go to pay the child support, but she would still get to take advantage of the earned income tax credit and that kind of thing. Innocent spouse is where, all the nasty stuff I was talking about. And it can be varying levels of violence, and publication 971 talks a little bit more about that. It's not something that is probably do it yourself. This is the kind of work that we have one attorney that specializes in this type of work. I've done this type of work, but I don't specialize in it. So because there's a lot of specific things you need to do, you need to characterize the facts in a certain way. You need to collect facts that may not be known to the average person. So yeah, sorry to be a downer, but this happens quite a lot in certain refugee communities where they don't believe that the wife is equal. And we all know the situation. And I've had sad situations where I haven't been able to convince, even as innocuous as it may sound, checking the box head of household. We had a perfectly happy married couple, but because of cultural issues, the person would not check married filing jointly because he felt that made his wife to be equal to him, and that was not acceptable. He thought he'd be shunned by his community, so he kept choosing head of household even though it was wrong. And it meant that his child didn't get to go to college because they kept denying their FAFSA because the taxes were done improperly, and he would not change it. All we could do is tell him what he was supposed to do, but it was up to him whether or not he would do it or not. That's it just is what it is, and it's very hard to wrap their head around. A really fun one we did was we had a polygamous client who was a polygamist back in his home country and at the border, and I can't imagine how awkward this conversation was. He had to choose legally through his refugee process which wife was going to be his legal wife, and then the others were all came sponsored family members because they were the mothers of his children. They filed this insane tax return that I've never seen anything like it, claiming everybody other than his legal wife as a dependent. So there was a whole load of people on this tax return. We ended up realizing that this person who claimed to be the head of the household actually didn't earn any money. It was quite amazing. So, we figured it out. It ended up being about 4 tax returns that had to be filed to actually do it properly. So it was quite interesting. I had a few calls to the IRC to have them explain how a polygamous person comes into the United States illegally. So that's quite an interesting case with that one. All right, I want to mention tax scams. Please let your folks know that not every letter, not every phone call, not every email they get is legitimate, even though the person says they're from the IRS or Virginia Department of Tax, especially if they show up at their door with a gun, with a badge, and they look very much like a federal official. That the IRS, as you can probably tell by the news, is understaffed. That means no one is coming to the door with their federal badge anymore. They'll send you a whole bunch of letters first. So if they still think those letters are a scam, and some of them are, they can bring them to us and we could take a look at them. And we could be able to tell because the letters have gotten much more sophisticated. They look very much like an IRS letter is supposed to look, but we can sort of find some telltale things that usually they mess up on. Usually these are calls from cell phones, email stuff. So just let people know if it seems weird, then just ignore. And if they do come to the door, it's impersonating a federal official, so they can call the sheriff. But I tell folks, just make sure you're safe first. Leave the situation, like hang up, close the door, that kind of thing. And then try to, if they want to, they can report it to the police, sheriff, or even to the IRS. The IRS has a form to report that kind of thing. I cannot tell you at all if anybody ever hears or anything happens with those. I've told people to do that, and I've given them the resources to report to the IRS, and I never hear anything after that. So I don't know if it works or not. So, but I know the scams are getting more and more creative, and they do target neighborhoods with a lot of people where English isn't their language that they're most comfortable with. So yeah, this is definitely a problem, and it's growing, and it's the communities you all are serving are definitely target communities. Okay, now ending on a much happier note, and if you can take anything out of this other than make sure they check to see if the earning income tax credit is correct on the return, is to use the VITA sites, volunteer income tax assistance sites. Now, this is an IRS program, but it's ran by the United Way in many places, including in Richmond. The United Way in Richmond runs our local VITA sites for the most part. Some of them are independent. VITA is amazing because unlike paid preparers that you go to other than CPAs, I'm not talking about CPAs here. I'm talking about, Joe's tax service that you see pop up during tax season. Joe doesn't have to really be trained at all. He just can download the software from the internet. Now he's a tax preparer. Sad as that is, and I've been trying for many years unsuccessfully to get some sort of regulation for these folks to at least have them take a test. Now, the VITA volunteers all take a test, multiple tests if they're going to be doing advanced tax work, and they have to pass by a certain level. Now, the reason why I tell the Virginia government, that they should take a test is because you should be able to take the VITA test, and they should be able to pass it with 80%. So the cool thing about VITA is it's free for people that make up to $54,000. So, and you can go back year after year. You do have to wait in line. It is first come, first serve usually. Right now, this year, because of COVID, they're taking appointments in those sites. And you do have to bring all your stuff. You have to have the proper ID. And then, but the people are trained. They take the tests. So the person that does your intake has taken the test. Then the person that completes your tax return has taken the test. And then at the end of all that, another person who's taken the test reviews it. So by the time you get your taxes submitted, you've had 3 people's eyes on your tax return that have taken a test that was set up by the federal government. I take the test every year because I train VITA volunteers at the Army bases. And I know it's not a walk in the park test. It's quite a rigorous test. It requires you to understand how to do this stuff. And so, yeah, I can't say enough about the VITA sites. Sadly, COVID has really, really messed with the VITA program, and they're back to nowhere near where the level that they were before. But a lot of sites are up and running, and there are virtual programs as well. So it's not perfect. It's not back to the way it was, but it's definitely still there for most people to take advantage of. All right, now I'd like to finally, I know we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to save it for any questions, but I want to thank all of you for all that you do for the newcomers in the United States. I'm a newcomer myself. I mentioned before, I had an easy time. I came from Canada via England via Canada. So I went from one Western English-speaking country to another. So I had a pretty easy time because I understood. I looked like everybody else. I understand the English language, but there's still things that my family struggled with when we moved to Canada that were different than when they were in England. And we had to have kind folks like yourselves help us be like, oh, this is where you file that, or this is where you go to sign up for this. What you're doing is amazing work. And we're just one part of the puzzle to help these folks have a great time going from a bad time in the United States. And I think that's great, everything you do. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's my thank you for the day. Anybody have any questions? I know we covered a lot. Tried to give you all some resources. So. The learning credits for service providers who might want to communicate it to clients. The learning credits, you mean the lifetime learning and the one that's for the life, the other one, the American Opportunity Credit. Let me go back up. Let's see. Credits, here we are. Okay, so there's two. They are unfortunately not available for below college level. So if the person's in high school, they wouldn't really be getting this. So if they're in their first 4 years of college, they would be able to choose the American Opportunity Credit. And now all of these credits have a worksheet they have to go through. It has to be, you have to like look at the, I think it's called a 1099-T or 1098-T, which is your tuition statement from the school. And that will sort of describe usually what part is usable for the credit and which parts aren't. So if they're getting some type of scholarship, that may actually eliminate some of the amounts of tuition that they were paid. Not everything that they paid during college is usable for the credit. Usually has to be related to mandatory for the learning. So you have to look at the rules for each one. Once they've phased out of those first year credits, those first 4 years, then forevermore, if they decide to start going to college permanently, then they can keep choosing the lifetime learning credit. It's not as big, but it's definitely worth looking at. Thank you, Hal. Did I answer that well enough?
Could I ask a question about the injured or innocent spouse and domestic violence?
Yeah.
I know you don't want to go into details, but in general, do the domestic violence charges have to have been like charged and stuck in court? Is that what we're talking about, or something lower than that?
No, okay. It becomes easier to prove to the IRS the worse it gets. If the police are involved and people have gone to jail, then it's actually better for the tax claim. Now, if they haven't, and maybe some type of restraining order has been, no one's gone to jail, but a restraining order, that's okay. It just sort of, it's more of a proof situation than anything else, because you can actually get affidavits from neighbors, family members. The closer they are to the taxpayer, the less power the affidavit has. But if it's somebody that's disinterested, like a doctor's like, yeah, this kid is getting beat up, and they'll put it in a letter, then that would be usable as well. But like I said, like it used to be a terribly hard thing to prove. CTLP and a number of clinics in the 90s went to court, took it up to appellate level, and got the rules changed through litigation to be able to be a bit easier to prove, but it's still a proof barrier. I've had a lot of victims who, rather than go down and relive the abuse at every level where you're going to have to prove it, usually a lot of times you have to go to court on these ones, because the IRS is just not buying what you're selling, and they don't want to go through and put their kids through multiple levels of telling people what happened to them. They'd rather just go into some type of payment plan or submit an offer and compromise. As sad as that is, but we do a lot of these cases, and we end up doing our lines here now that we're working with the National Network to End Domestic Violence and a number of other organizations in this way. And yeah, I met with our attorney that handles these all the time, and I was like, what percentage do you think is, are refugees? And she's like, well, a good number of them speak Arabic. I can give you that. So, see another hand up. Marilyn, I think you're muted.
Hi.
There you are.
Hi,
How
sir.
are you?
Hi. Good, thanks. Thank you. So a lot of the Afghans have been in the country, since September and have been supported with our government funds,
Yeah.
but they're now entering the workforce.
Mhm.
And I'm involved with a family that hasn't started working yet, but they have children. And so I'm thinking about if there are going to be child tax credits that they can avail themselves of in 2022, should
Yeah.
they be filing zero income now?
The IRS doesn't really like zero income returns, but
Mhm.
I don't have a problem with that. It would be more that they would file. If they're going to do another advanced child tax credit, they're going to open up a 2022 portal. So they would then. What people don't understand is when you filed in those portals, you actually were filing zero returns. That's how the IRS did it computer-wise and internally. So it would have the same effect. I don't really think it hurts if they want to do a zero return. Chances are the software is going to kick it out if they're trying to do it online, but it doesn't. There's nothing that says they can't do that. But because I don't know for sure if that portal is going to happen. I don't know for sure if they're going to have another round of advanced child tax credits. But even if they don't get them throughout the year, they're going to be able to claim the child tax credit on the next tax return.
Well, friends, we are right at noon. David, thank you for making this so informative and interesting and occasionally lighthearted. And it was great to have you. Our next session will be at 4 this afternoon. It is Maintaining Balance, Yoga and Mindfulness for Caregivers. And you will definitely need that after you've helped prepare some tax returns. So feel free to come back and let's have a good break. Thank you again, David.
Thank you. Have a good day.